So there's a question down there. Okay, can you guys look? Oh, another one here. Wait. Go ahead.
I go. So
may I ask you kindly to just say your name and what you do, just briefly.
Okay. So I'm Daniel Hernandez, and I'm a physicist.
Okay.
I'm a physicist. But my question is both for physicists and artists, because so when I thought about when I thought about coming to the art and science, and so I thought about many things. About how, and I do think that art and science are deeply related, and on many levels, and I think there is at least one that hasn't been mentioned here yet. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about it? And so my reflection was, because when I think about the connection between art and science, for instance, I think about this magnificent piece of not only Spanish. So it's not only Spanish art, but it's world art, which is Alhambra, this magnificent work of architecture. And for instance, I know that in Alhambra is famous for its mosaics. There are mosaics, and we find mosaics aesthetically pleasing because they are symmetric, because there is a way to make one mosaic after the other. And that pleases us, the fact that there's a symmetry, and that's how we construct walls out of mosaics. And actually, mathematicians, I know that they study this, and they know that there are 17 ways to do mosaics in a wall, and these are called the wallpaper symmetries. And we find those aesthetically pleasing in an artistic way. And then I was thinking that this is a connection with physics, because I think we as a physicist, we also think that symmetries are aesthetically pleasing, and when we find a theory that is symmetric, we say that it's beautiful in a sense. So it's part of what makes a theory beautiful for physicists is how much symmetry it has. So I wanted to ask about what do you think about the connection between symmetry and aesthetics?
I think you're right that there is a beauty in symmetry. There's no question, both in these scriptures that you talked about. But since you talked about the Alhambra is also a great monument to scientific thought. It has these very thin columns in many places, such as Patio de los Leones, that after many earthquakes haven't fallen down. And the question is why? Because there was some interesting thought by a scientist, no doubt, and the columns are supported on a spherical surface that can move both down and up. So there's an earthquake and the thing moves and doesn't fall. So there's another connection between science and art in the Alhambra.
That's a very interesting remark. I've always been, I'm just an astronomer. We don't really worry about symmetry. We do whatever nature's given us. I've always admired these fellows who think that symmetry is something that should be incorporated into the way we reason in physics. It's completely rational. But it probably has to do with what you say about the intrinsic beauty of it. So I'm sure there must be some Darwinian component to why we like symmetry, both in everyday world, and then we transpose that in a completely unjustified way, as I can see, into physics. However, there's one thing about the Alhambra. If you look carefully, you'll find that none of the patterns in the Alhambra, or indeed in any of the Islamic art, none of these beautiful patterns is ever perfect. Right? So in the Islamic art, there's always a deliberate mistake, an imperfection, because according to the way they think, the only perfect being or entity in the universe is Allah, and only Allah is allowed to be perfect. So patterns in the Alhambra, if you look very carefully, you'll always find the brick that breaks the symmetry. And you can carry that analogy forward and to the fact that we live in a universe of broken symmetry. So yes, no, thank you for that. It was a very interesting thought.
Well, I don't know if it's an aspect that he could answer your question. But I mentioned before context in terms of the presentation and how art is so connected to context. And my question was to the science people, how important is context in their work? I think Alhambra is a clear example of, obviously, another culture, the Arab culture. And I think the fact this superimposed in a historical situation, different cycles of the history of Spain, I think it's important to consider that this work of art, a fantastic piece of architecture, is part of a country that it was in the past produced by another culture. I think it's some questions of context here that I think it's important maybe to consider from perspective of art and history.
There was a question there, though.
Working? Okay.
If we move on.
Okay, I'm Ignacio, I'm also a physicist. So maybe my question is not so much about the relationship among science and art, but in general, the relationship among science, español o en inglés? Well,
Relationship no lo sabes decir muy bien, dilo en español.
Okay. Entre la relación entre la sociedad y la ciencia. Aquí se ha hablado mucho de, bueno, o sea, imágenes del HC, quarks, materia oscura, que yo entiendo que es lo que le interesa a la gente. Yo antes de estudiar física lo que me interesaba eran estos temas y no sé, electromagnetismo o física de fluidos, con todos mis respetos. Mi duda es, ¿hasta qué punto podemos intentar transmitir estos conceptos que son la física moderna, que son los auténticos conceptos de frontera, a un público en el que, para ser honestos, probablemente la mayoría tenga dudas con conceptos muchísimo más básicos que con estos conceptos con los que nosotros mismos, los físicos, tenemos dudas? O sea, no existe una divulgación de mecánica clásica. Sería algo así como la física del Instituto. Entonces, no sé si simplemente no hay ningún problema y tal vez simplemente con soltar algunas ideas al público y después el público busque por su cuenta, o simplemente después la gente va a tener unas ideas muy confusas porque es muy complicado sobre física cuántica y agujeros negros. Entonces no sé si piensan que haya una manera de transmitir conceptos mucho más básicos o si no hay ningún problema. Y son
Okay, I guess I have to stop you there because I'm getting lost. You're giving a speech. Synthesis, somebody. Álvaro, because no comprendo nada, sorry. What is the question? Maybe try now to say it in Spanish and in English.
I will pose the question and then...
Oh, he will pose the question for you.
Answer it. The question is, can one do better in education in science than it's actually done by throwing around some interesting ideas such as black holes and so on? My opinion is yes, and it has to be done at elementary school. There is no reason why children should know what elementary particles are and without the mathematics how they work. And that would make the only possible revolution in this direction, in my opinion.
I see.
I have another thought, which is, you know, music. I have a microphone. Music is something that everybody likes. There is something that drives us towards music. Very few people actually understand music. You don't really need to, you know, have a deep knowledge of music in order to appreciate it. And I think that science has some element of that. I believe that communicating the excitement about science is not necessarily ensuring that people really understand in depth what the equations say. Each major revolution in science came with the, you know, mind-opening new concepts. Relativity, you know, the relativity of time, the twin paradox, for example, quantum mechanics, uncertainty principle, things are not determined, give up the concept of exact predictability. And somehow it's never been really the physicists that transferred these ideas to the public, to the world. In a sense, it was always mediated by philosophers, musicians, artists, of course. If you go back to, relativity and quantum mechanics, it's really that community that got these ideas and brought them to people. And nowadays we're dealing with the concept of the expanding universe or dark matter. I think it's very easy for a philosopher, for example, to turn this into something that immediately triggers people's excitement beyond equations. And I count on that happening.
Okay, Belen has a question, but I want to make a comment. It looks like we need new Leonardos, new Michelangelos. Because Leonardo was not just a great physicist, it was everything. You were saying something a bit scary, though. We're not able to convey.
We're not able. I'm saying that
we're not trying hard enough.
I'm saying that we're not alone. So we can count on.
But where are the Platones? The Socrates philosophers. Sorry.
En español, quizá. Yo veo otro aspecto en esta pregunta que supone que es. Da la impresión de que presupone que mientras que nosotros sí podemos entender el arte en profundidad, los demás no pueden entender la ciencia. Yo creo que estamos en una situación muy simétrica. Por decirlo de otra manera, realmente no entiendo tu pregunta. Le podría dar la vuelta al asunto y preguntar, ¿tiene algún sentido que los artistas vayan y nos enseñen sus obras? En fin, no es dar miel a la boca del asno el llevarnos por los museos y tal, porque ellos ven muchas cosas que nosotros no vemos, ¿right? Y sin embargo nos está inspirando algo. Y yo creo que de la misma manera, nosotros mismos, ¿tú crees que conocemos realmente lo que es la materia oscura? No tenemos ni idea. Y en esta audiencia hay gente que la conoce, o sea, que sabe cómo buscarla o aspectos mucho más profundos unos que otros. Y sin embargo hay una conversación. Entonces no sé por qué la tienes que parar en los científicos, pensar que los científicos todos pueden entender la materia oscura y no el público y viceversa. O sea que, ¿entiendes lo que quiero decir? Por ejemplo, yo estaba observando aquí y yo decía, por ejemplo, para montadas es posible que las ilustraciones artísticas que han hecho mis colegas pues sean muy naïf. Y a lo mejor pues, a alguno le parece que otras científicas de los artistas son naïf y sin embargo eso permite coger ideas del otro. O sea, que a mí me parece extraordinariamente fructífero, y ya corto, porque esto es un rollo, diciendo algo que dijo a una señora que intervino antes.
Sí. En tu discurso. Creo que en los dos territorios hay evolución. Hay evolución en la ciencia y hay evolución en el arte. A veces nos quedamos con los clichés del arte, de qué es el realismo, la representación, conceptos de belleza, como si el arte tuviese que ser algo que accesible a todo el mundo y que todo el mundo lo puede interpretar. En cierta parte lo hay, pero también hay una evolución, hay un research. Y si las imágenes que he presentado, algunas, ha sido por la voluntad de decir que hay discursos dentro del arte interdisciplinarios que son más difíciles de entrar y que a lo mejor no la gente va a percibir. Yo uso esta frase, warning, perception, require involvement, porque en orden para percibir cosas hay que envolverse, hay que hacer una exigencia y un envolvimiento que a veces los asistentes a un museo de arte contemporáneo no tienen. Con eso quiero decir, refrendo un poco lo que tú decías.
Yes.
With these physicists from CERN here, I want to ask the question about these very beautiful representations of the proton collisions and how that data is being translated into visual images. We talked just a little bit about this, but in terms of, someone's making choices about color. I mean, there's a very interesting interface there, I think, the creation of the visual image that will represent those collisions, which is also a very important part of this outreach, I think, to the public in terms of knowledge about what's occurring.
Yeah, I don't know the details of the process. It's partly random, in the sense that, you know, different people put together different ways of representing, and there is a natural selection process. You know, you see somebody's slides representing a process, you like it, and then you take it over, right? So it's a natural convergence towards an optimal representation, which optimal means it gives most information with a minimal amount of detail, right? And again, it's not artistically driven, it's driven by the instinct, it's driven by the way our brain collects information, optimizes, processes, etc.
There's also another aspect which I think is important, and that is that we have to compete with cosmologists for resources, for money. For them it's very simple, they just push a button in a camera, click in some telescope, and they come out with something absolutely gorgeous. So we have to think a little harder on how to present our results.
Yeah,
Well,
and I think Michelangelo...
I think most of the audience is a scientific audience, I think. I'd like to explain an anecdote. I was in Prague in the end of the 80s, and a conference in the Prague Castle organized by Havel, at the time president of the government, and organized a conference of art and science by UNESCO. And Mandelbrot present his experience with fractals. Then I show some image here. They're very beautiful image, I think, in relationship what you would say. I think it's fantastic abstract image, but asking to him what it was his favorite artist, it was Picasso. Like that, in a way, sometimes the science evolved to very sophisticated situation, but maybe the perception in relationship with the art, it keeps in much conservative way. Because I think that in the way how the fractals view from the perspective of perception are a fantastic representation of one abstract painting it could bring, Rothko, Motherwell, all these artists. But in a way, it was back. It was to representation of the way how art is always the symbol, the body, or the sense of more conservative.
So I'm a physicist, but I think there's something very funny about what you said. I find it very remarkable that you find Picasso conservative, because I think if you ask anyone from the scientific... I think that just tells you a little bit of different viewpoints and perspectives.
Yeah, this it goes back to the first question that we had now, and also a question that we had just before the break, and that's like the connection between symmetries in science and in art. So, like on the point of view of symmetries, I'm a physicist, so we physicists have kind of this view that it's symmetric, it's beautiful, it's simple, it's nice. Now, if I look at, like, for example, all the things that we saw in the last talk, then I think this is maybe, like, from the point of view of an artist, this must be like an extremely simplistic point of view. I mean, symmetries are not the only aesthetic things that artists have come up with, right? I mean, there's a lot more than that. So I was just wondering if, well, anyone has an opinion or an idea of maybe other kind of artistic concepts that might be useful for physicists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say before, but there had already been three replies to the issue of the symmetry. I would like to try to put the business of symmetry under a different perspective, from the perspective of a scientist. But, you know, we like symmetries as a guiding principle, but perfect symmetry is the most boring thing that it can be because it's static. By definition, you need staticity in order to have something which is really fully symmetric. And the dynamics only comes from the breaking of symmetries, because that is what allows a system to evolve. As you know, if we didn't have broken symmetry in the standard model, there would be no masses, there would be no matter, there would be nothing, right? The universe would be absolutely dull. So we use symmetry not as a way, it's not the goal, it's the way in which we get to understand the world. And it's precisely that breaking of symmetries which creates the dynamics, creates the excitement, creates interest. And I think that is true also in the way we perceive the world. And that could be why at some point, even though historically, even in art, there has always been, some little, as was mentioned before. But I think that could explain, now of course with modern art, this has been taken to the extreme, right?
But I think the question was different, but it's okay. No, I thought I understood the question was rather what we saw in the last presentation from our artist friend was completely different, or was really, it's like we were speaking a different language, right? We didn't see much of symmetry, much of, I guess that's what I understood. Maybe you want to.
I referred before I don't like definition, but I think a way how art could be understood is perception plus information. It seems like it's a general opinion that art could be understood by everybody, and it will be great, but it's not true. It's not true because in order of perception, people could perceive an image, see, absorbed by the senses from the perception point of view, but sometimes it's missing the information. It's missing the information that could complete the experience. And that's the same thing with science. I think if you don't have this information, maybe you accomplish totally the experience. Like that, I think it's a mistake to see that both disciplines, one is accessible and the other not. I think both are inaccessible, but accessible for the people they encourage and involve and perceive. I don't know if that's something that people agree, but I think it's
Okay.
So I think that's, is this working? Can you hear me? If not, I can shout. All right, let me just say something heretical, because we're sort of having a love-in between arts and science, and I think they're very, very different. And he just told us, I think, the key to why they're so different. They're completely different activities. There's an overlap, but they belong. The only really aspect in common is that they both require creativity and originality. But the main reason why I think they're completely different domains is this. Art, as we just heard, implicit in what Anthony said, requires, so it's at some level subjective. It's culturally determined. So things that are beautiful in one culture don't stir any emotion in another. You require a certain cultural background, possibly some knowledge, previous knowledge, to appreciate the beauty or the artistic content of a particular piece. So that's true of art. Science is completely different. Science is universal. The Schrödinger equation is the same equation here in Shanghai, in Sao Paulo, wherever. There is just one Schrödinger equation. Mathematics is the same. It's not culturally determined. Of course, you need to have certain technical background to understand it, but it is not either a question of fashion or a question of culture. So I think that's where the big differences are. Not to say that there aren't some certain things in common. For example, so I like that question from you because you linked three important things: symmetry, art, and science. I've just told you what I think. You asked for opinions, so I'm giving you my opinion about the difference between art and science. But symmetry is the exception because there, for some reason, every culture that I've been exposed to appreciates symmetry. That seems to transcend boundaries. Every culture has symmetric paintings or buildings or some kind of concept of symmetry. That seems to be a much more generic concept. That's why I think our appreciation of symmetry must be Darwinian in origin. It must be naturally selected. The attraction we have to our symmetry must be a result of Darwinian evolution. But other than that, I think art and science use different worlds.
Different words, I fully agree. And now we open a lot of discussion. I'm pretty sure we're going there.
Okay, so I don't agree so fully in the sense that the aesthetic and artistic clearly also drive science. It's not only open experimental problems in the sense that, okay, I am teaching at the master level in the university and I am teaching open problems of the standard model. And half of the problems I am teaching have to do with things that we have not understood from the experiment, as you say. So it's something that our description of nature, we know it's incomplete. But the other half of the problems I am teaching have to do absolutely only with aesthetics. They are not experimental problems, but they are like the hierarchy problem or unification, things like that are only related to our aesthetical view of how the laws of nature should be in order to please us, actually, because I am not sure if nature herself minds about how these laws look like or not.
No, but we're not disagreeing, I guess, are we? We didn't say something different.
My turn. No, I disagree more, Carlos. Just very brief, I disagree more in the following sense. Okay, maybe it's too complicated a debate, but I do not... En español. Para mí, la diferencia, creo que en eso sí que vamos a estar de acuerdo, es que si tienes una idea en ciencia, luego tiene una consecuencia experimental y es correcta o no. Bueno, tratas de disprove it, ¿no? De falsificarla. En arte no, es diferente. Pero no creo que sea más universal que eso. Es decir, las preguntas que te haces en ciencia dependen, creo yo, y creo que está documentado en muchos casos, del contexto histórico-social. O sea, tú te permites preguntarte incluso la relatividad. O sea, hay mucho sobre esto. Te permites hacerte la pregunta dependiendo de un contexto social y cultural. Es decir, no es que la ecuación de Schrödinger vaya a ser cierta en esta sociedad y no en otra, pero al haberte preguntado lo que hace falta para llevarte a ella, tiene una componente muy subjetiva también. Entonces, en ese sentido, nos vemos algunos aspectos de la realidad, aquellos sobre los que nos preguntamos. Y en ese sentido, la universalidad solo está en que realmente tienes que probar experimentalmente que es correcto.
Sí, pero esa es la diferencia entre cómo se hace la ciencia, como tú dices, cuando se hace ciencia hay aspectos culturales, jerárquicos, etc. Y la ciencia misma. La forma en que se hace la ciencia es determinada culturalmente. La ciencia misma trasciende las culturas. Es válida no solo aquí en China, sino es válida en Andrómeda y es válida en el cúmulo de Virgo. Sí, eso estoy de acuerdo. El tipo de problemas que nos parecen interesantes, esos están determinados culturalmente. Pero ya que resuelves el problema, si lo resuelves o formulas una ley, son generales, trascienden la cultura. En cambio, el arte no trasciende la cultura, o rara vez lo trasciende.
I guess I would also disagree with a little bit with what you said, Antoni. No, in the sense that if you're standing in front of a picture, however beautiful or not beautiful you made it, of a collider interaction, or a result, a scientific result, it's not so much the information that you have to have that will enable you to interpret. I mean, if you're standing in front of one of your art pictures that you showed, I guess there I agree with you that the context or the information that the subject has to have to understand better is important, but I guess it's equivalent to say that the scientific result is so, you cannot change it very much, and the information that you might need, you said before that the common ground is that we both need information, more information to understand art and science, and in that sense, I guess not necessarily I follow. If I have more information, probably I can understand better a painting, which is so weird, but I don't need more information.
Well, I think
probably if you stand in front of a picture of an event, you're not going to, you need much more than information.
I don't know if we go to a dead end here. And I think it's maybe other things move on, other questions.
So there was one there.
So when we have seen a lot of examples, especially in the last presentation of the evolution in science. I mean, coming back to the relationship between science and art. So the evolution of science directly influencing the evolution in arts, not just in terms of inspiration, but also in terms of technology, the use of technology. We are seeing new methods of expression of art coming up. But is there a very good example of science, benefiting directly from some expression of art in some way? I mean, somebody coming up with a very good scientific idea from just by looking at a painting or something. Is there an example of something like that? It'll just be interesting. I mean, as a physicist, it may make me take more interest in arts to come up with some good idea.
Yeah, all the talks we gave. I have no other examples.
I guess the answer will be rather more negative, right? That it's more unlikely, I would say, at least personally.
So I mean, it's not really easy to say that science and arts, are mutually beneficial. It's more like arts is benefiting from science, and yeah.
I don't think you can say that it benefits from science. Science is just one of the manifestations of what we have around, and therefore can trigger work. But
no, I mean,
see many examples in which it's not that art is driven by science. Right?
No, it doesn't mean that art is driven by science, but I mean, art seems to be benefiting more from science, and science is from arts. Right. Just appears to be that way. Sorry to be controversial.
You don't know, Belen says. Okay. Okay, she has one question.
I just give one example, which I think is a way to think about this, and this is the case of a knot theorist, a mathematician, who, from looking at paintings by an artist who was himself very interested in four-dimensional geometry, found a whole new way to think about braiding and lattices in knot theory. So it was a case where an artist really opened up a new way of thinking for, in this case, a mathematician. But I think visualization, sometimes the intuitions that artists have, do have this possibility of contributing. And I would say that that's true about the representations that are occurring in terms of computer data, that certain ways, I was so interested in the fact that in the one collision you showed that the gamma rays appeared to be rectangular solids, and then Michelangelo clarified this for me, that this is the way that data is being generated. But that's very interesting artistically, and I think the fact that CERN has an art program says something itself about the value, perhaps, of artistic insight into visualization and understanding. So I think it's more common that it's flowing the other way, but it does happen this direction as well.
if one thinks of the studies of perspective and Renaissance and then the development of optics, it could be also another instance of the influence of arts and the studies from artists into science.
Well, that's more science influencing art than the opposite. Or maybe two ways. Let's call it two ways and stop the discussion.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. We lost half of the audience, though. So I stay up here. More questions for our panel?
I could think of one example. I think there's the concept of a golden cut. I don't know if that's the right English expression. It's a concept in architecture and art, like some symmetry. Does it? Golden section, yeah. And I heard that being used to construct actually the neutrino mixing matrix to predict the different mixing angles. It was based on the idea of a golden section.
But the golden section comes from the Greeks. The architects, it comes from mathematicians.
Okay, yeah. So it doesn't count.
No.
So it came from, I knew the name of the fellow, but anyway, it came from a Greek mathematician, and then that was acquired by architects, and then that inspired. However, I mean, I think we mustn't forget that, I think I read a study that shows that amongst practicing scientists, the level of artistic ability is well above average from the population as a whole. So, you know, Alvaro had a picture of Einstein with his violin, but I think actually some of the cartoons that he showed, he made himself. Isn't that right? So I think the artistic ability among scientists is higher than average, and it must be telling us something. I don't know exactly what, but something.
I'm not sure about that. I think my own artistic ability is certainly below average, but
control sample.
No,
but it's true, actually. You do find a lot of
what I would like to say
artists
is that
in science.
This sort of asymmetry in this, maybe arts taking more from science than science taking from arts, I would not say that it says one is better than the other. They just play fundamentally different roles, because artists reflect on everything that happens in society, right? Including science. So it's not surprising that some artists pick up scientific topics, while science is very specifically looking for things and not necessarily for arts. So the whole mission of science is not directly to look for arts, while arts is the general, where artists pick up anything that happens in society, social sciences, natural sciences, whatever. So it's not surprising that artists pick up more from science than scientists pick up more from art, simply because they have different ideas of what they should do or what they want to do, right? I mean, I don't know if it's anything close to clear what I want to say, but... So I would say it lies in the nature of the thing. It's not necessarily an insult to say that one takes more from the other. Sorry.
You have your speak. You want to comment?
Well, I think certain concepts that seems like debated here, or symmetry, for example. I think if we see art history, the evolution of art history makes that these concepts that are relevant at a certain moment, and after a cycle, is not relevant anymore. In the way that we could see in architecture, you could have a era of construction, and the next era is of the construction era. You could have order organizing in a painting, and the next cycle is this painting is totally disorder. The equilibrium of the work is because it's a psychological reaction from, to kill the father, to kill the previous. And I think it's this part of a culture and the cycles of culture. I mean, it's concepts in art that are never supposed to be absolutes. They should totally question. and sometimes going back and retake it. Like that, we see periods of classicism and periods of anti-classicism, and periods, as I say, of construction and deconstruction in architecture. And this is things that are not necessary, I need to see from fashion perspective. It's from cultural cycles on how generations, I mean, I live a generation of the conceptual work, or everything it was black and white. The 80s, in painting, it was color, expressionism. After that, the post-conceptual. Like that is, in art, is a constant evolution. And we could keep it always with the same certain kind of values. I think I take it the Malraux perspective of creating each one individual museum. I think everybody here could create his own museum, and the content it will be different. Maybe it will be a painting of Mondrian, maybe it will be a sculpture of Henry Moore, or maybe they have a kind of comic book, a film of Godard, and another person, it will have totally another universe. But in art, we have absolute values in the museums, and that is a way is confronting the individual perception. Because these absolute values, sometimes they are not connecting with the individuals. And this, I think, is sometimes in the contemporary art, this is the distance between the audience and the work. I don't know if that is relevant to what you say. No?
Okay. So
but I would like to say that.
Well, we are connected again, I see. So I want to take the opportunity before more of you leave to thank again each one of our wonderful speakers for their contribution. So let's thank everyone again. And thank you all, the public, for being with us. Bye. I don't know.